Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. We just finished up talking about the Texans' perspective on not just the Stefon Diggs trade, but the way that their front office has really been able to pull themselves together after living in the basement for a few years there, and now they are a potential Super Bowl contender with a very bright future. But now we're going to look on the other side of that Diggs trade and talk about the Buffalo Bills, where we saw a similar situation as we do anytime we have these young quarterbacks who are overperforming their contract. You have that first window in the first handful of years that is, I wouldn't say wide open, because you also still have to deal with the fact that you have a young quarterback that can sometimes be mistake prone at times. And the Bills were sort of in this situation where they had plenty of opportunities during the course of these first few seasons with Josh Allen, and now they're in a place where he's on his contract extension and he's getting more and more expensive by the year, and as a result, we're seeing the Bills have to sort of cut ties with a handful of these more expensive players that have been on their roster for some time, where we saw the Diggs trade, as well as, like we talked about yesterday, so we don't need to go too in-depth on it, but the Tre'Davious Whites, the Jordan Poyers, the Micah Hydes, and letting others walk in free agency like Gabe Davis and Mitch Morse. So definitely a retooling time here. I don't want to dive into it too much, but this whole idea of, is the championship window closed? I would say no, because for it to close, that would mean that there's no chance that they could find their way back into Super Bowl contention, because they have Josh Allen, which is pretty much the sole reason. If you look at DraftKings, their win total is still 10.5 even after the Diggs trade. So the loss of one receiver didn't totally alter the situation there in Buffalo in terms of what Vegas expects them to do, which I believe is fair, because Diggs wasn't necessarily a big-time asset for them down the stretch of the season, didn't have a 100-yard game after week 6 during the regular season, and like I sort of alluded to yesterday as well, I thought that there were times where the Bills' offense looked better as Josh Allen was sort of spreading the ball around more, and Stefon Diggs was incredibly vital for Josh Allen during his development in his early years there, and having a true number one guy. But I do believe that Josh Allen is at the point where he can take on, and I'm not saying, I think Robert Griffin III actually made a comment on social media yesterday. I know the situations aren't entirely equivalent, but the fact that Josh Allen, the way that he phrased it, is Josh Allen now has the chance to prove himself the way that Patrick Mahomes did when he lost Tyreek Hill. Obviously, it is massive to have that number one option, that weapon that can help elevate your game during your early years before you have that full NFL experience. But at a certain point, if you are a legitimate, top tier quarterback in the league, you get to a point where you can elevate all of the players around you. And I do think that Josh Allen can be that caliber of quarterback. I know that it's been sort of popular since their playoff loss to they lost to the Chiefs this year, yeah. Since they lost to the Chiefs in the divisional round, that it's been a little bit popular to sort of downplay, oh, well, he wasn't able to get it done in the biggest moments. I just don't see it that way. I thought that, I think in that game specifically, the run game all of a sudden went from being really effective to entirely ineffective. Josh Allen in some of these late game plays, I will admit, I feel like he gets a little bit locked on to certain weapons. He can overlook, second, third options. He still has maturing to do, but I do still think that he is a top 3 quarterback in the league, and he has the ceiling to be an MVP caliber player. And all that being said, the Bills do still, when you look at whether or not they can be as competitive this year as they were last year, they can in some degree. They are a worse team today without Stefon Diggs than they're the worst team today without Stefon Diggs. That is absolutely true. But I think that it's not unsalvageable that they're going down this dark path here where they're going to entirely fall out of it. They still have Josh Allen, who can do wonders for your offense. You seemingly had more of a run game last year in James Cook and the way that that developed over the course of the year. So hopefully that can come back as well. But they are going to need a number one receiver. Their top three right now is Curtis Samuel, who they just brought in, Khalil Shakir, the second year now, I believe. They drafted him in 2022 in the 5th round. He really developed into a nice weapon for them. And it's Mac Hollins, who they brought in from Atlanta as well. So they need a new number one wide receiver, and they probably have to address this in the draft. I think would be probably their number one need in terms of headed into next season still. They have the number 28 overall pick here. So this is a very deep wide receiver class. There could be plenty of first round caliber talent players available when they're still picking. Some of the names that, if you look at the way that big boards have it all slated out, or some mock drafts, Brian Thomas, I think he actually goes maybe earlier than a lot of these mock drafts have him at, but Brian Thomas from LSU, Adonai Mitchell from Texas, Ladd McConkey from Georgia, Xavier Worthy from Texas, and Keon Coleman from Florida State. All of these guys could be solid options, some more than others. I think that I would have Thomas, Mitchell, and McConkey as sort of the priority in this group, but still plenty of valid options. Even if you go further down in the list as well, I think there are plenty of guys who could find their way into very valuable roles on NFL teams next year. But could they trade up for a new elite wide receiver one? They have if you look, the top tier wide receivers in this upcoming class are seen to be really, solidified, great options, great prospects in Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, and Rome Odunze. We have a comment here from Galaxy, where he said, I want to see Xavier Legette on the Bills, to be honest. I think that Legette is also somebody from South Carolina. He has been a big-time riser during the combine process and everything, that I also think he could definitely be a sleeper wide receiver in this class. That's the thing, is these are the names I mentioned that, projected to be first-round grade, but I'm also really huge as a Patriots fan. Ricky Pearsall from Florida, I think that he's going to be a great pro. This is such a talented wide receiver class that it seems like every year you have these can't-miss guys, and ultimately, one way or another, one of the guys don't pan out. Last year, Quentin Johnston, who I'm not fully out on, but had a very disappointing rookie year, and when he was coming out of TCU, I loved him. So, we see all of these big names and the big-time prospects. Sometimes they don't always pan out, but it feels like you almost have to try to miss on the prospect, mismanage them as they come into the NFL to try and draft a receiver in the top 2 rounds here and not get a quality player out of it. So yeah, Legette's another great option there. I'm not saying they don't even have to be limited to just one necessarily in this draft as well. We'll see how they decide to play this out, but there was a little bit of buzz on Twitter yesterday about the idea of them trading up into the top 10 potentially to try and go get a guy. Marvin Harrison Jr. is probably unavailable. Sounds like he's going to be going number 4 to the Cardinals. We'll see how they choose to play their cards in that situation. They could also, trade down a little bit, see if somebody wants to slide into 4 for J.J. McCarthy. But Marvin Harrison Jr. seems a little expensive, but Malik Neighbors is a name that has really been sort of talked about. Oh, well, he would be so great in the Buffalo situation there. And I sort of wanted to address that. Sam Monson of Pro Football Focus went back to the 2011 draft where we had a little bit of a comparable situation of a team late in the first round trading up into the top 10 to take a top-end wide receiver prospect. And in 2011, we saw the Atlanta Falcons trade from 27 up to 6 to select Julio Jones. So Monson laid out what the trade package was at the time there. They traded with the Browns, giving up their 27th overall pick, a second and a fourth rounder in that same 2011 draft, and then their first rounder in 2012, as well as a fourth rounder. So 5 picks, 3 of which being in the first 2 rounds. I feel like for the Bills here, it's a little bit risky to try and swing big in a situation like that. And, you think back and you look at that Julio Jones deal, where I disagreed with Monson, is I think he said that it didn't really work out for Atlanta. I have a hard time, coming away with Julio Jones's career in Atlanta and saying that they made the wrong move in that situation for everything that he did for the organization. Did they win a Super Bowl? No, but he helped lead them to a Super Bowl, and credit Matt Ryan, of course, as well, but he also helped maximize the talent of Matt Ryan, who ended up winning an MVP that same year as well. So, these types of moves can definitely help. And if you get a guy like Malik Neighbors, we just talked in depth about the idea of how valuable it is to have these key cornerstone guys playing on rookie contracts. That would absolutely be the case if you get a, can't miss prospect like Neighbors. But there is also the sort of situation here where the Bills are going to have a lot of holes to fill in the next couple years, especially because of the fact that their front office has not done a tremendous job drafting up to this point, which is also, briefly, maybe even a reason to take the can't miss guy, because they haven't been tremendous in that department up to this point. But again, like I sort of mentioned, and Galaxy mentioned in the comment section as well, there are so many talented receivers in this class that it feels like even sitting at 28, you're going to get a quality player as long as you do your due diligence as a front office and pick the right guy for your scheme. But it is interesting when you sort of weigh all of this. We've seen the best version of Josh Allen when he has a truly elite wide receiver 1. Stefon Diggs had that interaction that took place a couple days ago where he definitely mirrored that idea. Someone on social media, I don't have the exact username, I'm sorry, but somebody put out there saying that a top-tier receiver isn't essential for Josh Allen to succeed. Stefon Diggs responded to that, questioning it, saying, "You sure?" And again, like I sort of talked about, I thought that Josh Allen, the way that he was able to put together some more of these real methodical drives was something that we hadn't seen from him in the past, which is something I really keyed in on following their loss to the Bengals in 2022, because it seemed like it was just home run, big player bust for them. And that even carried into their first game of the season against the New York Jets, where he had 3 turnovers, 3 interceptions. I think he had 4 turnovers total because I think he fumbled as well. But 3 interceptions, just chucking it deep and hoping to come away with something. We know that Josh Allen has the arm for that, but I don't believe that that is the best way to utilize him going forward. I think he can do more than just sort of those home run types of swings. And ultimately, when you look at the Bills here going forward, again, it depends on how you want to weigh the situation. I think they're going to need to try and plug a variety of different players in some holes as they come, and having them on rookie contracts can be very beneficial. Again, as long as you hit on the picks, but with the type of money you're going to have to pay Josh Allen going forward. And I mean, truthfully, when you do look at their roster, they're talented. I don't know how many real blue chip guys you can really say are on their roster. Now, they just paid Dion Dawkins as well to a contract extension this offseason. Dawkins is a very talented player. Hopefully we see some more guys come up in the pipeline for them. But really interesting situation here for the Bills. I guess just one last time here before we take our break to reiterate, I don't think that their championship window is closed as long as you have a top 3 quarterback in the league, but they absolutely have a ways to go in needing to fill in the pieces around him, which I think is possible. And as much as I don't love Sean McDermott necessarily, he also has been leading the Bills to the playoffs since he got there when Tyrod Taylor was the quarterback and the team was very much had a different personality, identity, and McDermott can be a nice defensive mind as well. So we'll see whether or not they continue to develop some of these young pieces that have been maybe not necessarily stars yet, but when you do look at their draft, there are the likes of some of these defensive players like Terrell Bernard, Christian Benford, Gregory Rousseau that have shown some flashes but haven't fully come together just yet, and curious to see whether or not he and the Bills can fully unlock the potential of this roster. But for now, we're going to be taking our second break. We will be right back, and when we come back, we're going to be diving into the situation surrounding the Kansas City Chiefs and the future of their stadium after the renovation plan was rejected by the state there. So stick with us. We will be right back.